Hello and welcome back. So far we've taken a look at the interface in Rhino, and now we're going to take a look at how to specify locations and distances as we start drawing things. I'm going to go up into my top view and maximize this and zoom out just a little bit. You'll notice that as I start a command, let's say I'm going to start the polyline command, watch what these values tell me down here, the X and Y value. As I place my cursor close to the green and red line, you'll notice that as I move along the red line, my X value is increasing in a positive direction. And as I move back towards the intersection of those two lines, it goes back to about 0. And as I continue on the left side of the green line, that X value is now a negative value. The same thing for the Y. So as I go up the Y, I'm going into a positive direction, and as I go down the Y, I reach 0, and then the Y becomes a negative value. So negative Y values are down in this region, positive Y values are in this region here. Positive X, negative X. So where these two lines meet is pretty crucial. That's a 0 point. Let's say that I want to place my first point for this polyline at 0. How do I do that? Well, I could try and zoom in and get close to that origin, but I'm never really going to be right on that point. It's going to be exceedingly difficult to get there. Much easier way to do that within a command is to simply type 0. So I'm at the start of my polyline. Rhino's waiting for me to tell it where I want to start. I'm going to simply type 0. Whoops, and that didn't quite do what I wanted. I'm going to type 0 and hit enter return, and that'll place my first point at 0, and now I'm ready to place my next point. And as we've seen before, to place the next point, I simply left click, and again it asks me for the next point, and I can continue left clicking, placing points where I want. Let's say that I want my next point to be exactly 10 inches away from the last. Well, you'll notice that down here I have a value which essentially tells me how far away I am from my last point. And I could pull this out until I saw 10, but again, it's going to be very difficult to get bang on 10. Much easier way to do that is to simply type the value that I want up in my command prompt. So in this case, I'm going to type 10, hit enter, and now you'll notice that I have a line of a fixed length. This dark line here is 10 inches long. The white line that you see is a preview that sort of indicates that that's just extra line that won't be placed afterwards. So anywhere I click right now with a left click, that creates a 10-inch long line. And I can use this length constraint throughout my command. So if I want to make the next line be 5 inches long, I simply type 5, press enter, and now my next line is 5 long. I can also use this in combination with my shift. So if I wanted it to be 5 inches long and I wanted it to be horizontal, I simply hit the shift, and now I'm actually constraining that next line to be horizontal and 5 inches long. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this. We also can take advantage of the fact that we have a grid here. So I'm going to just rerun that command, starting the polyline. And I'm going to come down here to where it says snap, and I'm going to click on that so that it becomes bold. And now you'll notice that as I move around my grid, my cursor is actually snapping to that grid. So anywhere I click, I'm going to be placing a point on the grid, and it's really that simple. At any point, I can take that behavior off by just clicking on snap again, and now I'm off of the grid, so my next point won't be on the grid. And I can again at any point just choose to go back onto that grid, and my next points will be back on. Let's take a look at how this works with a rectangle. So I'm going to start my rectangle tool by left clicking, and I'm going to just turn off my snap for a second. So again, I have complete freedom over where I'm going to start my rectangle. It's asking me for the first corner. So let's say I want my first corner to be here, and now I can sort of choose where I'm going to place that second corner. Let's say I'm going to place it up here. That's my rectangle. Just get rid of that. And I'm going to restart that command with a right click. And this time I want to place it at the 0. and without turning on my grid snap, I'm just going to type 0. And there I go. So I'm constrained now to the origin for my first point. Now, let's say at this point I decide I actually do want to use my snap to set my second point. I'm going to just turn this on, and now I'm back in my snap mode, and I can decide where that next point is going to be. Let's say that I want my rectangle to be 5 inches tall and 10 inches across. Well, I could count my units just by counting the snaps. So that's 5 snaps, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and place my cursor right there, click, and then pull up 5 units, and that's now 5 going up. That's one way to make a rectangle. I'm going to just undo that and rerun the command. This time instead, what I'm going to do is specify the length with numbers instead. So going across, I want it to be 10 units long. And so now I'm constrained to 10 inches. And now I'm going to specify what I want my height to be. In this case, I'm going to type in 5. And there I go. So that's a much quicker way to draw a rectangle of a known dimension. I'm just going to give you some examples using other tools now. So let's go over to the circle tool and start that. And it's asking me for the center of the circle. I'm going to place a center right here on the corner of the box. So I've just left clicked to set that center, and now I'm simply specifying what the radius is going to be on that. I could pull out and drag and set it that way with a left click to end, or let me just restart that. I could specify that radius using a number. So in this case, let's say I want the radius to be 15. I type 15 and press enter, and that gives me a radius of 15. As you can probably imagine, a lot of these shapes have a three-dimensional equivalent as well. So I'm going to go into my perspective view, just going to maximize that, and I want to show you what the equivalence of these two would be three-dimensionally. So starting off with my box tool, I'm just going to left click on this, and again it's going to ask me for my first corner. I can be on the grid if I want, like I am right now. I'm going to set this at 0 right here. Click to set that first corner, and now it's asking me for my second corner. So I'm going to pull out a little bit and set my corner right there. Now since this is three-dimensional now, I also have to specify the height, and I'm going to just maximize all 4 views, and you can see in my front and right viewport that as I pull up in perspective, the preview in the front and right show that the box is actually going up past that red line. So I click to set my third point, and that's done at that point. Another easy way to create a cube in this case, if I wanted to use the same value, for instance, I'm going to rerun that command and start it at 0. So I'm typing 0 to start it at the origin. Let's say that I want to create something that's 15 by 15 by 20. Well, rather than counting out my units, I'm simply going to type 15 for the first dimension, and that sets the length going across. I'm going to just hit enter again. We'll use that same unit for the second input as well. And you can do this for a rectangular tool as well, for just a two-dimensional rectangle. And now I can specify my height, again, either just dynamically, or I could type it in. In this case, I'm going to just hit enter a third time, and it will use that same dimension for the height as well. What about the circle? The circle is found under the flyout, which is right behind the box command. So this is going to be a sphere in this case. So if I start my sphere tool, it now asks me for the center of the sphere, very much like what we just did with our circle command. So that's going to be the center of the sphere. I'm going to pull out and left click a second time to set the radius on that. And that's a really brief introduction into how you go about creating objects in Rhino. I'll see you at the next video. Thanks.